Hello. Wow. Welcome everyone today to Woven with the new floor. And it's so exciting. I am still mesmerized looking at the floor. So today we have been using Black liturgies for a while, but we decided to use Cole Arthur Riley's other book, which is actually her thoughts around the different prayers and stuff that's used in Black liturgy. So Daniel and I are going to talk about dignity, and we're going to have some different dignity prayers used in today's service. And then next week, since there's this little combined service at Beaumont called Rally Day, where all of us are going to be exhausted and tired. So instead of having a woven service, we're going to watch a movie, and it is called Moonlight. It is wonderful and sad and fits within some of the themes we're going to talk about today. So we would definitely like to welcome you for that. And then, Derek, would you like to come to the mic and make a little announcement? Make a little announcement?
I don't know how
You know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I have officially, I guess officially as of August 25th, I will have stepped down from my role here at Woven and Beaumont as my family has made a transition to another city, and it just seems like a step in the right direction for both my family and for Woven. So, yeah, that'll be the last week.
Yeah, and so on the 25th, instead of having a service, we are just going to celebrate Derek for a whole hour. We'll have food and snacks and cake and all of those fun things to celebrate Derek and his wonderful family and their wonderful contribution to Woven. And then stay tuned. We've got a lot of exciting things kind of being worked out right now for September. We'll probably have some more updates next week on that front as some things get finalized. And so we just want to say a very special welcome to all of you, regardless of your race, your gender, your socioeconomic status, whether you like the Bible or not, because I most of the time do not, whether you believe in God or not, if you think they are real at all, you're welcome here right where you are right now. John's going to lead us in a Black liturgy.
God in us. We know the miracle inherent in our existence. We are here, our beauty stretching out and dwelling within us. But it's hard to believe in one's dignity when the systems and societies to which we belong are content to destroy us. We have learned lies in our worthlessness, in the explicit and implicit ways the world interacts with our bodies, stories, and homes. It is incessant. This lie of our own inadequacy, this charade of our inferiority, remind us that our dignity does not wane or bud in relation to anyone's belief in it, including our own. Let us rest with the knowledge that we have nothing to prove. Our dignity, perpetual as it is divine. We will not shrink. We expand. Remind us of our making, for we too contain the divine. Amen. This is for trans and non-binary lives. God of our truest names, we confess that too often we have encountered liberation in a person and chosen hatred. We confess our own jealousy at a person capable of living into their true self when we ourselves are suffocating. We are in bondage to binaries that limit our imaginations for full liberation. Remind us that you yourself contain multitudes. Let us encounter the divine that refuses to be contained by human definition or imagination. Expose all the ways we neglect trans people in our activism. Expose the moral rot that makes us so terrified of publicly supporting Black trans women. Let us become honest about the hatred we have inherited, the violence enacted against queer folk at the hands of those who came before us, Christianity playing no small part in a culture of transphobia. Protect those with the courage to stay near to themselves. May their liberation be multiplied in all who encounter it. Amen.
In you, making sense of who I am. By seeing who you are, and in you is all I've ever yearned for. By claiming your name, you're all I want. Jesus, Jesus, how I trust you, how I've proved you o'er and o'er. Jesus, Jesus, precious Jesus, oh, for grace to trust you more. Jesus, the name above all that I face. The name as sweet as honey. Jesus, by taking on what I go through, you believe I can be more. A humble God is known. Jesus, Jesus, how I trust you, how I've proved you o'er and o'er. Oh, Jesus, Jesus, precious Jesus, oh, for grace to trust you more. I wanna trust you more. I wanna trust you more. I wanna trust you more. Jesus, Jesus, how I trust you, how I've proved you o'er and o'er. Jesus, Jesus, precious Jesus, oh, for grace to trust you more.
I am not sure where Logan went. So, Oh, don't say that. You know I'm Pentecostal, or was. Logan, where are you? I'm confused. So you're playing? Okay, never mind.
Was that my fault? You give new meaning to this life. You move me to health instead of strife. There's no war between the halves of me. There is only wholeness that you see in me. You give new meaning to this life. You move me to health instead of strife. There's no war between the halves of me. There is only wholeness that you see in me. This is love, knows no bounds or walls. It doesn't make the sinner crawl. It doesn't hope for fear at all. Jesus knows my heart and name, and he loves me just the same, without an ounce of guilt or shame. You stand with me when no one will. You give me the courage to stay still. in the cynical. It doesn't hope for fear. Jesus knows my heart and name, and He loves me just the same, without an ounce of guilt or shame. Jesus knows my heart and name, and He loves me just the same, without an ounce of guilt or shame.
Hello.
This is take 2.
Yeah. Can I just say, though, that I'm actually super excited because we've never got to do this before. So
That
I'm
is
actually
true.
very pumped about
That
getting
is
to talk
true.
with Daniel Grace. So, as we alluded to at the beginning, we are continuing the actual book version of the Black Liturgies book by Cole Arthur Riley. So I kind of wanted to start, because you introduced me to Black Liturgies. How did you find Black Liturgies, and what, like, kind of what brought that into the forefront of your mind? I know it was on Instagram, but
Yeah.
tell me more.
It was on Instagram, and I wish that I had an answer because I truly don't remember. I'm going to speculate and give you a theory as to what I think actually happened of how I discovered Black liturgies in the first place. I'm pretty sure that a friend or an acquaintance of mine from Asbury University, who tends to lean a little bit more progressive in their faith, had reposted a lot of the like inhale, exhale parts of Black liturgies.
That makes
And
sense.
I think that I just saw that enough times that I said, ooh, I must follow this. This feels good. And this helps me heal. Yes, please, more of this, thank you.
Yeah.
And that's how I found it. I'm pretty sure.
I was so
But
grateful.
This is speculation.
Yeah, I was so grateful when Daniel told me about them, because if you hang out with me for literally 1 second, you will find that anything too far on the biblical spectrum would be,
Yeah.
I would probably have some critique with it, to put it mildly. And so to have liturgies, one, that come from another culture that's completely foreign to me, tragically. Like, that is a tragic thing, to know that there are people of color around us, and
Right.
yet it feels like another culture. And I
Yeah.
talk in that language because I need to recognize that, to surrender my own ego
Yeah.
of how culture needs to look like and what it's supposed to be. And that's hard to do. So to hear their liturgy, and then how much interconnected, right? Like the prayer that John prayed for non-binary and trans people, like, talk about a prayer that, like, just needs screamed from the rooftops, right? We don't think in a lot of religious circles praying for communities like this, which is what
Right.
was so brave about what Cole Arthur Riley did
Yeah.
in writing this book of liturgies. So just to give people some context, it was first a Instagram page of liturgies that turned into a book of liturgies that turned into a book of
Stories behind
Yeah.
the liturgies.
stories behind the liturgies, which Daniel and I, when we were prepping for this, were like, oh yeah, we'll talk about 3 different ones. No, we're going to talk about dignity. There's too much content to cover 3 different liturgies. So
Yeah.
I think to get us started, we need to go back in time to 2020, right?
Yeah.
All of us are probably traumatized forever by that year. It's fine. We were all quarantining. Some of us were living our best lives.
Must be nice.
And then some people were tortured being trapped in their homes, or as John wisely said, not being able to hug people. Those were hard things for people. So that was a time. But also in 2020, and feels chaotic, George Floyd and Breonna Taylor happened. And so next thing you know, we have very important conversations about race that are long past due happening.
Yeah.
And we were then faced with, are we going to respond like what most corporations did, which like did some BS inclusivity movements that were not really real or genuine, that we knew they would drop just like they do every Pride month, right? At the end of Pride, like we're going to hire the gays in June, and then July 1st, you're dropped.
Yep.
Like that's kind of how that inclusivity goes.
The performative fill in the blank.
Yeah, exactly. You know, you can buy the shirt
Yeah.
for a month, and then it's got to go.
Exactly.
So was it going to be that, or was it actually going to be
Yeah.
lasting change? So I really wanted to ask you, how do you think that went?
And by it, do you mean the conversations that happened, or?
I think the movement itself, and when I want to specify,
yeah.
I'm not talking about Black Lives Matter specifically. I'm
Right.
talking about larger cultures
Right.
actually accepting cultures that are different than their own.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and that is what I thought you meant. I think that we are still very much in the middle of it, even if the public conversation has visually shifted from these larger conversations of the white race that has been in power for so many years.
Right.
Some can argue too many years.
Right.
How that white power and white privilege, yada yada, how whiteness is interacting with minorities
Right.
and ethnicities that are not white.
Right.
Yeah, I think we're still very much in the middle of it.
Yeah, and sadly too, especially on the political spectrum, like I hate that they're a statistic.
Yeah.
I just want to leave. I just want to
Yeah.
like just lead with that of like, because I'm a political junkie, but like they just talk about them as only statistics
It's the human
and not as human. And literally at the top of this chapter, and why I knew we'd never be able to go on, is it literally like in the second paragraph, the sentence was, he told me that black was beautiful. And I went, damn it. We see black as statistics still, not beautiful.
Yeah.
That's the tragedy. And why this conversation is so important is we don't think of it in that way, right? I was vulnerable with you on the phone. One of the challenges during 2020 for me was I'm a nonviolent person. I would protest any war that there would ever be. And so whenever there was first protests that with tearing down statues, like that was hard for me to get my mind around until I heard what Leslie Odom Jr. said. He's like, we did the peaceful way and they killed him anyways. And that was MLK. And I went, oh shit, I get it.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter. There has to be noise some way because you won't listen to peace. And I'm learning that there is some peace in something that wouldn't it be natural for me?
Yeah. I heard someone a few years ago now say that a culture that speaks violence can only understand violence. And so if the language of the oppressor is violence, the oppressed cannot make their voices heard by peace. Like there has to be, to be understood, there still has to be a certain level of violence. What kind of violence? That's a whole other conversation.
Right.
Because there are so many nuanced levels to violence.
Yeah, and
I
that's what
think-
circles into our dignity conversation, right? And because in some ways, we need to see black dignity as it is right now.
Yes.
And like in a lot of ways, like our issue is that we don't see the dignity of people of color now.
Right.
And that's a challenge.
Yeah. Because I had three thoughts at the same time, and they clashed.
I love when that happens to my brain.
Let me recover real quick.
Fine. Take your time.
Now it's too silent. Please say something, because
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
not going to recover very well.
No, you're fine. While you're getting it together, because the other part of it too, right, is like there's still an advocacy part of it, where I think one of the joys that we can do as white people specifically is we can talk about this, even when there's no black representation in this room.
Right.
That's actually our way of, even you and I will probably mess this up in some way, and we'll probably look back in 6 months and be like,
Yeah. What
dang
were
it,
we
we did this all wrong. And we'll have to,
Yeah.
and we get the joy of learning from that without having to be taught to
Right.
help broaden our own minds to see the
Yeah.
dignity of people. And other things we have to continue to fight for. It's still harder for them to buy a house and to do
Right.
some practical things. So
Yeah.
there's, this is we are definitely living in a nuanced conversation when it comes to dignity. Part of it is a responsibility on us to see the dignity they have, and part
Yes.
of it's a responsibility on us to advocate for things to get better,
Yeah.
for
Exactly.
them.
Yeah.
because there's no question that
Yeah.
both those things are happening at the same time.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the tendencies that I see white people specifically have is if someone is operating in a different way and they're not meeting the subconscious prerequisites that we tend to have about what we think, and when I say we, I mean white people, and not just like based on the color of their skin, but based on the culture that we are surrounded by.
That's right.
And a lot of the work that we as a white congregation need to do is to see the prerequisites that we have, see the biases that we have, work on them, and by work on them, I mean get rid of as much of it as we
Right.
can to be able to be a safe space for black people. In to bring sort of an analogy to mind, like we are a very queer congregation.
Yeah.
We have a lot of queer people on staff. We have a lot of queer people involved in leadership. We have a lot of queer people part of our congregation, and it would be like a straight congregation wanting to diversify by and doing that in all of the wrong ways, not unlearning their biases against queer people,
Yeah.
not having the conversations with straight people about queerness before they can actually be a safe space for queer people.
Right.
And so this is the work that I think you would agree we both feel is very important, is very necessary for us to do.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, anytime, and I get the joy of having someone cut my hair who actually, like, in this time, so this is the cool dignity part, right? So a friend that John, Tawana, and a lot of us went to church with actually created an incredibly successful business during COVID, is a black owner. And I just get to sit and, like, I mean, I get to, like, let her color my hair for 5 hours. Like, it's just the most epic thing ever. And I also get the greatest pearl of my life not to learn from her, because that's not the ask, but to step into her culture, her dignity, see how her life is and operates. And, you know, as a spiritual person, she talked about she was serving at a pretty high level at a church, and it was during 2020, and how it was, she called it the hardest serving thing she's ever done, because people kept looking at her for answers, but the tragedy was they really just didn't want to feel bad about themselves. They didn't actually want to move the needle and to see her as a valuable, dignified person in society. And I almost started crying. Like, I'm like I can't, because like my hair's being colored, and I'm not gonna lie. It's like, it was like hour 4, so my scalp was like hurting, because like that's how this goes. Just so you know, it doesn't take you don't just get your hair colored simply. But it really dawned on me, like, the tragedy of of not seeing people's dignity. And it goes back down to, and I think we as spiritual people, and I really don't even want to put it on Christians, because I actually think it's a lot of spiritual communities.
Yes.
We really miss the mark on accepting their culture. It's almost always a demand to make people of color think like us, behave like us. You've got to like do the music in our style. Like, we're not welcoming in that way. Isn't it so funny? Like, how many churches you all know that like they always have the all are welcome, and then we all know there's a little asterisk next to it, right? But when we think about culture, when's the last time we've like inserted ourselves into that culture? Because it's altogether different.
How many times have we colonized
Oh yeah, for
spaces
sure.
that are not white already?
Yep.
Like, and it's pretty subconscious too.
Yeah. Where's the spot I want to? Yeah, I like what Arthur Riley writes on page 5. It is not wholly unusual for individuals or cultures to imagine God as being like them in some way. Perhaps this is because we lack an imagination for a being who loves us and doesn't resemble us.
Yeah.
How about
Things that are unlike us strike us as unsafe.
Yep.
That is the line that I underlined.
Yeah, me too. I like
It's
underlined that 3 times.
so
Like,
good.
I've got to get this in my brain somehow.
And it doesn't just apply to race stuff.
No.
Like, it does very much apply for it, but
It's so
also
much more.
anything and everything. Yeah.
Right. And so we'll have to go into our own experience. And I really want to capitalize on your trans experience, right? Because it's a statistical fact that Black trans people in particular are the most attacked group of people in our society right now. Stupidly, I might add. Like, stupidly. I don't even really understand it because the answers are so garbage, right? Like, I can't even fathom the argument itself behind it, but it is interesting. It's a really hard thing to watch right now, is just people you wouldn't think, right? So people who are pretty cool with gay people like me be so anti-trans. It's disgusting.
Yeah.
Like, we're in a place, and then you add a racism element to it, and then it's dangerous, right? Because the fact is this, and this is hard to say because I have to accept it for myself, all of us have some racism in us. And I say that, and I feel safe to say it because the multiple people of color I talk to actually would say the same thing about themselves. Is they're like, yeah, we have to deal with our own racism as well. I'm like, well, shit. If you say you have a lot of racism, what do I have to deal with? Like, this is terrifying. Like, this is hard.
Yeah.
And I think that's the important part, and why I love that she started this book with dignity, right? Of actually seeing dignity and quality in people, because we're really great in specifically Christian culture here about talking about people's worth and their value and their dignity, until we get down into it and we start getting into cultural differences, and that's where our biases show themselves the worst.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's the hardest part.
Yeah.
You know, and when we're touching on the same with the trans conversation, could you imagine being someone who has racism and then has to deal with racism, and then they are still trying to find their own dignity and their own worth because it didn't feel natural to them? The tragedy that is. And so, you know, right? Like, just that you just don't have, as not being a person of color, but you know you didn't feel comfortable in your own skin for a long time. And all I can do is empathize, right?
Right.
Because I didn't feel that.
Yeah.
And so do you want to talk about that journey and what that adds and where that helps you think about dignity? Because it's important.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I can only empathize with the experience of Black trans individuals. Because yes, even though I come from a different culture, I am still very much white. So I get a lot of the benefits and a lot of the privilege that comes with being white and being perceived as American at first glance. Even though my gender and my presentation is a whole thing. But yeah, for a really long time, I did not have the language to understand or to describe my internal experience with who I am, with my gender, with my identity, all of those things. And having been raised to be a woman, a lot of the fear of safety that was instilled in me from a very young age, from just my experiences, negative experiences with other people, and also other women sharing with me and giving me warnings of things to avoid, things to do to keep me safe, which is so whack that we teach the minorities to work to keep themselves safe and not address the actual problem, the actual perpetrators.
Yeah.
But I digress. So a lot of that fear, I still am carrying that with me, even though I present more masculine and pass more often than I don't. And actually, a couple of days ago, I was in Walmart and I saw an elderly black person with his son. And I don't know what came over me, but it hit me like the chances of this individual right here in front of me having lived through segregation or having had encountered segregation is more likely than I think. And in that very moment, I think I was experiencing some uncertainty of how safe I was in that Walmart, like just for my own sake. And I see this older black man, and I think to myself, if this is the fear that I am experiencing, that is like carried over from my past, how much more is his fear for his safety?
Right.
How is his posture of existing and moving through this world? How are the past experiences from his childhood impacting his presence now? And I don't know if the words that I'm saying right now are doing the light bulb moment that I had justice, but yeah, for one of the first big tangible times in my life, I was so aware of the dignity of another human being and the experiences that maybe not aware of the experiences themselves, but the nuances of human existence. I don't know.
Yeah. Arthur Riley writes it this way: we have to expand our understanding of how other cultures and people contain the divine.
Yeah.
And I think that's the uniqueness here is we get an opportunity to expand our understanding of something bigger than ourselves. And that actually gives us a beautiful pearl and a responsibility to undo whiteness.
Exactly.
And recognizing, too, we're talking in a vacuum, this takes time. She also writes, when I speak of whiteness, I'm referring not to the mere existence of a person in a particular body. I'm referring to the historic, systemic, and sociological patterns that have oppressed, killed, abducted, abused, and discredited those who do not exist in a particular body.
Yep.
Another thing that they write is, in order to rend whiteness from the face of God, we must do more than make new images. We have to persist in observing and naming all the ways this force has obscured the face and character of God. The God I've known does not dominate. He kneels and washes his enemies' feet.
Yep.
And so we now have to deal with the nuance of there's still an oppressed world.
Yeah.
There will be violence, and finding a way of representing a God who washes feet. I don't even know how to compartmentalize around that, but it's a both and.
Yeah.
It's not an either or.
Yeah. It's not a binary.
It is for sure not binary.
If anything, it's a spectrum, and then even then, it's more complicated than that, or more complex.
Yeah, I think the beauty in the dignity conversation, too, is it allows us to just see individualism, too, in a person, right? So, like, I don't. It is so nice to just look at what makes a person unique. And I think we've undersold that, right? Because we've turned things into stereotypes tragically.
Yeah.
And to actually see a person's uniqueness and their value and their uniqueness. And what if that is, there's something divine in that? I don't even know if that's true or not, but I'm just contemplating. Like, that is just a thought out loud. If I get struck down by lightning later or die tonight, you all know that I broke the heresy meter past the point of no return. So I'm just in pure speculation mode. But I have to wonder if there is something, if, and again, these are churchy words that I don't like, but if there is something to this image of God thing, then maybe there's something divine in each person and culture that's beyond our natural understanding.
Yep. That's so funny you say that, because I actually underlined a couple of words.
Go.
So she writes, how can anyone who is made to bear the likeness to the maker of the cosmos be anything less than glory? This is inherent dignity.
Yep.
Hello?
Yeah.
What? Yeah, and then later she also says, we've grown numb to the idea that we ourselves are made of the dust, mysteriously connected to the goodness of creation that surrounds us. And I think in evangelical spaces, a lot of the talk about like people's physical bodies is so negative, is so beating over the head with a stick of you are bad, you are bad, you are bad, when like sorry, the creator that also made so much sand where every single grain of sand is like different, and then also snowflakes, and then this complicated sack of meat and bones are with souls and thoughts and ideas and the capacity to create. That is bad. Sorry, not buying that bullshit. And then furthermore, that self-hatred of one's own body in those in power can very easily transform into the hatred of other people's bodies because they are not like their own, and the fear of liking something that is different is, I think, so terrifying to some that it just translates into violence because of the fear. It's like a knee-jerk effect sometimes, and it's hard to be aware of it sometimes. I'm speculating, but...
Yeah, I found it interesting in this chapter that you say that, because a lot of this chapter, they talk about the fact that they wish their hair was different.
Yes.
They actually talk about pretty exclusively the part of their body they hated was their hair.
Yeah.
And how they actually learned to see dignity. And they like gave me, because I don't like any of this stuff around salvation is hard for me, but I actually love the way that she wrote about it, and it's helping me heal that part that's so hard. It says, people say we are unworthy of salvation. I disagree. Perhaps we are very much worth saving. It seems to me that God is making miracles to free us from the shame that haunts us. Maybe the same hand that made garments for a trembling Adam and Eve is doing everything they can that we might come a little closer. I pray the stitches hold. Isn't it interesting? That was the thought that came to them to heal their hair and to get past their hair.
Did you make a copy of my book?
Yeah, I know.
Because I underlined that
yeah,
same
I know.
passage.
So Danny and I, we underlined it. We read these separately, we promise.
Talk about being on the same page. Oh my
But
God.
it really did. It made me think about actually the beauty of God being with us where we are in our biases, but also loving the naturalness of people's hair. Also, it's really funny that it's hair for this person because I criticize my hair all the time.
Yeah.
Like, it actually drives me crazy. It's why I color it all the time. And I compare myself to other people's hair nonstop. So it was kind of funny to me that we get to opportunity to see people's dignity. And I think the encouragement for us before we gather at the table is that we get to see someone's dignity where they are in their culture, even if it's one we don't understand.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm like challenging myself for, right? Like,
Yeah.
this is a queer white congregation. That is what it is. There's no people
There's
of
no
color
way
here.
around it.
But that's the opportunity. That's the gift, is to step into cultures that we don't understand.
Yeah.
So thank you all for listening to us, and we're going to gather at the table now.
When Jesus took the bread and the wine, it was to say, this is my body, and this can now be your body too. I'm doing this because of your dignity, because of your worth. So as we take this, we take it not just, we do it to remember Jesus doing that, but Jesus did it for us to know how valuable he thought we were. So we take that together. And similarly, when you took the cup, he said, drink this, all of you. Do this because I am in you. Even as this wine will be in you, so I am in you. Amen. Thank you, Holy Spirit, that you, when you created us in the image of beauty and in the image of worth, in the image of dignity, that it was more than just, I'm going to make some creatures who will love me. It's, I'm going to make some creatures that will be like me, that I can love, that like Adam I can say, these are bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. That we are truly in your image. how you love. Will you give us eyes to see dignity in everyone? Give us understanding how to show the dignity. And would you make us as a church a place that is always growing, always learning, always becoming more like the inclusive you. So now thank you for this time and for this, the bread and wine of your love. Thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. So good to be with you all. The end of August is still all topsy-turvy, as Logan had mentioned earlier. Incidentally, announcement we forgot, Woodland Arts Festival. I think that's this coming weekend, is that right? So Dolores, one of our own, will be showing. We'll have a booth at Woodland. And if you've never seen her work, go check it out. It's pretty spectacular. And in fact, I think we're going to get some of her work on the wall back here. Her Women of the Bible quilts. So that would be pretty cool. That's what it's looking like. Thank you for being here. Great to be with you, and we'll see you next week for